All right, so I'm going to teach you how to get to um, Google Classroom. This is my classroom. I have a gazillion of them, but you're in the math help one. I'm just going to change it to with the free and a help. This is the social studies homework from Miss Davis. It's the last item posted. You're going to click right here, and it takes you right to this, which is the actual posting of her homework. So it says 3.2, from Old Stone Age to New Stone Age. The Old Stone Age, Paleolithic Age, began about 2 million years ago and lasted until about 8,000 BCE. It was during this time that early modern humans developed. Like the hominids who came before them, early humans were hunter-gatherers. They wandered from place to place, looking for animals to hunt and plants to gather for food. Often they took shelter in caves, like the cave painters you read about in Chapter 1. The New Stone Neolithic Age began when people learned to farm and produce their own food. The discovery of farming did not happen all at once. Over thousands of years, people gradually learned to raise animals and plant crops. Eventually, they began to rely on farms for their food. Now they could settle down in one place instead of roaming in search of things to eat. The Neolithic Age began around 8,000 BCE and lasted until about 3,000 BCE, when people learned to make tools out of metal instead of stone. Farming developed in many parts of the world during this time, including parts of Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Many Neolithic settlements were located east of the Mediterranean Sea, where the land was fertile, good for growing crops, or fertile, which means good for growing crops. Here, people built towns and villages such as Jericho, Catalhoyuk, and Jarmo. You can see the map over here to see those spots. We got Catalhoyuk, I'm not trying to say that, Jarmo, and Jericho. People in settlements like these lived very different lives from earlier hunter-gatherers. With farms to provide their food, they could build permanent shelters and form larger communities. They could make better tools and clothing, and they could trade with people in other places for resources they wanted. As you will see, these changes made life safer, more comfortable, and more interesting. So now we're on page 78. 3.3, creating a stable food supply. And I have to read quickly, guys, because I have only 15 minutes to finish this, and there's a lot of pages here. During the Paleolithic Age, people obtained food by hunting animals and gathering plants. But hunting and gathering did not provide a very stable or dependable food supply. Wild plants and animals grew scarce when people stayed in one area for too long, and hunting was dangerous. Hunters were often injured or killed. Gradually, people discovered they didn't have to depend on hunting and gathering. Instead of gathering wild plants, they could plant seeds and harvest crops. Over time, they learned which seeds produced the most crops in the areas where they lived. Early farmers also learned how to domesticate animals, raising and using them for their own purposes. They raised sheep, goats, and cattle for their meat. They got milk from both goats and cattle. They used mules to carry heavy loads and pull plows. Notice that domesticate is in bold. That means it's probably an important word. Together, the growing of crops and the domestication of animals are called agriculture. The Neolithic Age began with the invention of agriculture. For the first time, people had a stable food supply. Let's explore why this change was one of the most important advances in all of history. And over here on this right, it says domesticate is to train a wild animal to be useful to humans, and agriculture is the business of farming. All right, 3.6, developing new jobs. Having a stable food supply allowed people to develop new kinds of jobs. In Paleolithic times, people's main job was finding enough food to survive. With farms to provide their food, Neolithic people could develop more specialized skills. A good example is the town of Catalhoyuk, which dates back to about 6,000 BCE. Historians believe that the townspeople worked in a number of different jobs. Besides farmers, there were weavers, basket makers, tool makers, and traders. Focusing on one job allowed people to get better at their work. In Catalhoyuk, farmers learned how to grow more than 14 kinds of food plants. Clothing makers developed a way to spin and weave. They wove natural fibers such as wool and linen into comfortable clothes or cloth. In some regions, people mined flint so that stoneworkers could create sharper tools. Neolithic people didn't just want to survive. They wanted to make themselves and their surroundings more beautiful. They decorated their pottery and baskets with geometric shapes. Stoneworkers learned to polish stones to make shiny jewelry and mirrors. House builders added special rooms to honor the gods and goddesses they believed in. The development of different jobs encouraged people to become highly skilled at their crafts. This led to new and better ways of doing things, and different jobs created much more variety in community life. All right, 3.7. Beginning to trade. Another major change in Neolithic times was the growth of trade. Paleolithic hunters gathered rarely traded with other groups. Hunter-gatherers rarely traded with other groups. They usually used only the plants, animals, and other resources they found nearby. Once people settled in towns and villages, trade became much more common. People trade to get resources they don't have in their own area. As Neolithic people became more skilled in their crafts, they wanted materials to improve the strength and beauty of the things they made. Getting those resources became the jobs of traders. Traders often traveled hundreds of miles to find what they wanted. They crossed mountains on foot, rode donkeys across deserts, and sailed the Mediterranean Sea on ships. What were the traders looking for? Popular items including flint and obsidian. Obsidian is a black glass from volcanic mountains. Craftspeople use it to make knives, knife blades, arrowheads, and mirrors. People also traded for beauty products like shell ornaments and a red ore called hematite. Women rubbed hematite on their lips and cheeks to make them redder. The growth of trade allowed people to make use of more resources. It also brought them into contact with people from distant places. These contacts helped spread ideas and knowledge around the ancient world. It says right here, this arrowhead made from obsidian, Neolithic traders all around the Mediterranean region prized this resource. It was found mostly in the area that is now Turkey. Look at that. All right, 4.6, attacks by neighboring communities. As Sumerian cities grew, they fought over the right to use more water. Sometimes cities located upriver, closer to where the rivers began, built new canals or blocked other cities' canals. In this way, they kept water from reaching the cities that were downriver, farther from where the river begins. Fights over water became so intense that they led to bloodshed and killing. Sumerians began to look for ways to protect their cities from their neighbors. The plains provided no natural barriers for protection. There were no mountain ranges or rushing rivers to keep out enemies. So Sumerians began to build strong walls around their cities. The walls were made of mud bricks that were baked in the sun until they were hard. The Sumerians also dug moats outside the city walls to prevent enemies from entering the city. Most people lived in houses behind the walls, while the farms lay outside. In case of attack, farmers fled the fields and took safety inside the city walls. The walled cities of Sumer were like independent countries. Historians call them the city-states. By 3000 BCE, most Sumerians lived in city-states. A stele is an upright slab of stone inscribed with letters and pictures in memory of important events. This part of the stele of the vultures, which was found in Iraq, pictures an attacking army. It's this one right here. All right. 5.2, characteristics of civilization. As you learned in the last chapter, Sumer was a challenging place to live. It had hot summers, little rain, and rivers that flooded the plains. Yet the Sumerians overcame these challenges. They built complex irrigation systems and large cities. By 3000 BCE, most Sumerians lived in powerful city-states like Ur, Lagash, and Uruk. But can we say that the Sumerians had created a civilization? To answer this question, we need to think about what civilization means. What characteristics make a culture a civilization? Historians name several such characteristics, including these: a stable food supply, so that the people of a society have the food they need to survive; a social structure with different social levels and jobs; a system of government so that the life in the society is orderly; a religious system which involves a set of beliefs and forms of worship; a highly developed culture that includes art such as painting, architecture, music, and literature; advances in technology; a highly developed written language. Did Sumer have these characteristics? Let's find out what the evidence can tell us. And right here, this picture of a penny and another little coin. It says, these two artifacts, one modern and one ancient Sumerian, are both examples of one characteristic of a civilization. Can you name the characteristic? All right. 5.8, technology. All civilizations create new forms of technology or practical tools and inventions. The Sumerians made several technology advances. The Sumerians' most important invention was a wheel. The earliest examples of the wheel date back to 3500 BCE. Sumerian potters or pottery makers used wheels as a surface for shaping clay into pots. Potters' wheels spun flat side up on an axle. Sumerians discovered that a wheel that was flipped onto its edge could be rolled forward. They used the discovery to create wheeled carts for farmers and chariots for the army. They built the wheels by clamping pieces of wood together. It would be hard to imagine a more powerful invention than the wheel. Before the wheel, people had to drag their goods on flat-bottomed carts called sledges. The sledges often got stuck in the mud, and they couldn't support heavy support heavy loads. Wheeled carts made it much easier to move goods over long distances. Oxen could pull 3 times more weight on wheeled carts than they could on sledges. Another technological advance was the ark. Sumerians' arks were invented upside down, U or V-shaped structures built above doorways. To build arks, the Sumerians stacked bricks made of clay and straw so that they rose in steps from the walls until they met in the center. Arcs added strength and beauty to Sumerian buildings. They became a common feature of temple entrances and upper-class homes. Some historians say the ark is the Sumerians' greatest architectural achievement. 5.9. Writing. A final characteristic of civilization is a highly developed written language. The Sumerians created a written language called cuneiform. This name comes from the Latin word of wedge, or for wedge. The Sumerians used a wedge-shaped stylus, a sharp-pointed tool, to etch their writings in clay tablets. Sumerians developed cuneiform around 2400 BCE. The earliest examples of cuneiform show that it was used to record information about the goods Sumerians exchanged with one another. At first, they may have used as many as 2,000 symbols to stand for ideas and sounds. Over time, they were able to reduce this number to about 700. Cuneiform was based on an earlier, simpler form of writing that used pictographs. Pictographs are symbols that stand for real objects, such as a snake or water. Scribes drew the symbol with a sharpened reed on wet clay. When the clay dried, the marks became permanent record. This relief sculpture shows the scribes using a clay tablet and stylus. You can't really see, these pictures aren't coming out very good. Alright, and here are your reading questions. Directions. On a separate sheet of paper, I can't move this, hold on. On a separate sheet of paper, answer the assigned questions in complete sentences. This is from Old Stone Age to New Stone Age. Question 1. List the 3 early Neolithic settlements on the map. List the 4 rivers. It's just a few towns that we talked about. Number 2. How many years ago does the map depict? 3. How did early humans get their food? 4. What is the difference between New and Old Stone Age? 5. How did tool making changes at this time? 6. Where did farming develop in the Neolithic period? 7. Why would living in a community make life safer? 8. Why would living in a community make life more interesting? Alright, creating a stable food supply. Number 1. Why would food grow scarce during the Paleolithic Age? 2. Define agriculture. 3. Define domesticate. 4. What did people during the Neolithic period learn to plant? 5. What animals did they domesticate? 6. How do you get food? 7. Are you like the people during the Neolithic period? Explain. Developing new jobs. What did having a stable food supply allow people to develop? Number 2. List the jobs at the settlement of Catalhoyuk. 3. How many types of plants did they grow? 4. Have you ever grown food? What type? 5. What was flint used for? 6. How did Neolithic people make their surroundings prettier? 7. What does different job create? Alright, beginning of trade. 1. Define trade. 2. Define ore. 3. How does trade affect you today? 4. How do people trade? 5. Describe at least 2 ways a trader may have traveled. 6. What were beauty products in the Neolithic period? 7. What was obsidian used for? And last but not least, 8. What did trade contact help spread? So look through your book, listen to the reading, and hopefully you can answer some of these questions. Alright, have a good day.